With that, my first question is, well, now that you have this new position that puts you closer to Washington on a somewhat permanent basis, what are your priorities in terms of the Valley and now that you have this new position?
Well, obviously, one of the priorities is jobs and opportunities for people. I mean, that is a priority that we have not only for the Valley, but for San Diego and the whole nation. So getting our country back on a footing that's sustainable and one that creates growth. So that's something that we're all trying to do together. I think this community is unique in that the unemployment is so high. I mean, it does distinguish itself in that way, in a very in a very sad way. That it does require, I think, more help, especially with infrastructure, opportunities for growth. So those are the things that I'm going to focus on. However, another, I think, equally important thing is immigration reform. I know this district very well. I probably have walked more houses than probably almost any politician here, interestingly. One of the things that I found out when I got here is a lot of people don't walk door to door, they use signs. And signs are effective up to some certain level, but it is more important, I think, to go and actually talk to the people. And I talk to so many people here, more than in any other place I've ever walked, that they'd say, yeah, I really have to do something for my mom, for my cousin. They're undocumented. They don't have, they don't have papers. And so we're always afraid they're going to get deported. And a lot of people, I was surprised at how many people, especially in Calexico. And so I think the federal government has to have some comprehensive reform around immigration. I'm one that believes in a comprehensive approach where it can tackle the issue of everyone that's here undocumentedly. So every person here will have the opportunity to have earned citizenship, earned in a way that if they haven't paid their taxes, they have to pay them back taxes. If they have a criminal record, well, I'm sorry, they won't be able to go forward and become a citizen. But it has to be something that deals with everybody, not just the dreamers. There are some Republicans who now are coming around saying, well, we should deal with some of the immigrant issue, but it should only be those dreamers, those kids that came here through not their own volition, and that we should only deal with them. And I would say no, that tackles 10% of the problem, but it doesn't tackle 90% of the problem. 90% of the problem are their parents. So what are you going to do with their parents? Deport them? I mean, we've had these horrible situations where the parents have been deported. They've literally ripped these families apart. And the United States of America shouldn't be about ripping families apart. We should be about nurturing families. So anyway, that's again one of my priorities, to make sure that we get comprehensive reform, not just piecemeal reform, not something that falls short of the mark, which would be, again, the mark would be comprehensive reform that includes everybody that's here and doesn't have documents.
And with that, I think that what do you think it should look like, is this comprehensive reform? I mean, I've heard that Republicans are thinking about making these different bills, and President Barack Obama is saying, no, we have to make one single bill, one single strategic law. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I would say this, that you have to deal with it comprehensively. In other words, you have to deal with the whole issue, not just part of it. Now, if the Republicans simply want to divide it into different bills, and so have 2 or 3 or 4 bills, or maybe even 5 bills, so some people can vote against them, some people can favor them, they would still pass, so I'm not against that. I don't think it has to be just one bill. What I will insist on has to be one solution. In other words, it can't just be one bill that deals with just dreamers. That can't be the solution. The solution has to be one that deals with everybody. So if there are, let's say 90% of the Republicans decide, well, we'll vote for the dreamers, but we won't vote for, grandparents that have been here most of their lives. Well, okay. Well, we'll let you, if you want to carve one bill out that deals just with the dreamers, and another bill that deals with the grandparents, another one deals with the parents, I'm not against that. I mean, I'm willing to do that. I'm certainly think that you should accommodate people when they want to vote. But what I'm against is that's the only one that would come up for a vote. In other words, they all have to come up for a vote. I think they all would pass. I think you'd have enough votes in the Senate. In fact, I'm really confident about that. I think you'd have enough votes in the Congress if they're allowed to be voted on. But again, it turns out that the Democrats don't have the power to force a vote because we don't have enough votes to force that. But I think if we're allowed to vote on it, I think we would get the votes, and I think some Republicans would vote for a comprehensive approach. again, not to vilify the Republicans, you got some people that really do want to, I guess that feel like me. I get my inspiration from this, from the Bible, where it says, in Matthew, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. That's how we're going to be judged. I mean, it's the very famous, how are we going to be judged? Well, it's the least of my brothers, those that when I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me. And so I think a lot of Republicans, have that same notion. Okay, then obviously the immigrants are the strangers. Let's welcome them. And so I do think that there'd be enough votes on the Republican side in Congress to pass comprehensive reform. But again, that means then that the Republicans have to allow these bills to come up for a vote. But if they want to divide up the vote, different bills, I don't have a problem with that, as long as we deal with the whole thing. You can't just deal with one part of it.
And as far as guest worker program, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the guest worker program in this nation worked for a long time. It was used to be called the Bracero program. And the Bracero program, I think, had some success around it. Interestingly, my father came under the Bracero program. So my father came under the Bracero program, worked here for a number of years. Then after being here a number of years, he was sponsored. And back then, if you had a sponsor, it's fairly easy for one then to become a permanent resident. And that's what my dad did. So he became a permanent resident. So I certainly believe that we could make a program work, but it has to be, again, part of the bigger issue. You can't just deal with that aspect of it only. I know some Republicans just want to deal with the guest worker program, so that's all we need to do. Well, I'm against that. You have to have a comprehensive reform that deals with everything, including that part of it.
Very well. And moving from immigration and the issues, going with employment. You were talking about employment as your priority. And yes, as you said, we do have that unfortunate trademark here, chronic unemployment, poverty. And what do you think can be done differently that hasn't been done before to address that situation that we have here in the Valley?
Well, one of the things, obviously, the Valley has had is high unemployment. Historically, it has run higher than other areas. And part of that is because it's an agricultural community. There's no doubt about that. Agricultural communities, because of the seasonal nature of agriculture, do run higher unemployment levels. There's no doubt about that. You see that throughout the Central Valley. You see that throughout the United States. So in that sense, if you have an agriculturally based economy, you will have higher unemployment. But that being said, I mean, here you've had higher chronic unemployment than you should. One of the things I think that we're attempting to do here, and the Valley I think is doing it well, and that is looking at alternative forms of energy, renewables. So for example, the solar power plants that they have now are ones I think that are very beneficial. But even more so is the geothermal. Geothermal is a resource here that's rather unique to this region. There are geothermal opportunities in other parts of the country, but this has a very rich resource. And it's very expensive. It's very high upfront cost. But once you do get involved, it's a very beneficial type of energy, because the way energy works is that you'll have a need for it at some particular point, and then at that point you've got to be able to cover it. So, for example, you have a very hot day, people are going to throw on the air conditioners. You're going to need that energy at that specific time. Sometimes the wind's not blowing, so those big fans don't do you any good. Those big fans out in the desert, they're not turning. So wind power goes down right at the wrong time. So it gets very hot. You have an incredible heat wave. You need a lot of energy, and all of a sudden the big fans, they fall down. What is still there? Usually solar's still there, because it is hot. So you normally do have a good source there in solar. But even better is this geothermal. Geothermal runs 24 hours a day. It's always running. And you put that right into the base load. So geothermal is a very, very good source of energy. It's renewable. It has great byproducts. I mean, you're going to be able to get some rare metals here that you can use. So I think that's a great resource that is going to bring a lot of jobs. One of the other things that we're hoping to do, we're trying to bring the F-35 here, the Joint Strike Fighter. We'd love to have the F-35 be housed here in the Valley. We think that would create probably 4,000 jobs at least, direct jobs, and probably significantly more than that indirectly. So those are the things I think that are going to be important. Diversification too. I mean, I know that there's been big fighting about this in this community, but I think it's important that you diversify, the economy down here. That it's not just simply based on agriculture. You have to have other forms of business, and I know a lot of business people are attempting to do that, and they should be encouraged. And I think the county's doing everything it can to facilitate that, because you do have to have diversification. San Diego, we faced this when I was on the San Diego City Council. We were based, so much of our economy was based on the military. San Diego had grown up as a military town. We had a lot of development around the military. Not only were directly connected to the Navy or the Marines, but we also developed a lot of weapons systems. And those things started to go by the wayside. We no longer had the threat of the Soviet Union. So the spending on the military came down significantly. And we then had a real crisis on our hands. So we tried to diversify our economy, and we did that. We were able to get into high tech, we were able to get into biotech, we got more into education. We diversified our economy, and we've been able to withstand this really incredibly mean and deep recession because of that. If we had just been based on the military, we'd be in terrible shape. So anyway, what has to happen, I think, in communities is that are a single source of their economy, agriculture or Navy or whatever, they have to diversify.
Sir, how do we diversify, especially because we do have this population that there is a sector of the population that is not necessarily that keen to be diversified, or at least are wary about it. I think that would be the word, wary about diversification.
Well, you see that. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a sector that's very wary, and I think usually it's change. People don't like change. I mean, if you're doing well under one system, why do you want to change it? Well, because it isn't working for everybody. And so that's why I think you have to diversify. And you already see some of that. I mean, there's tension here with solar. You see it. I mean, people are saying, well, wait a minute, those are lands that should be planted. They shouldn't go into solar. Well, maybe. I mean, maybe they should put them in places where, you can't plant. But you do have to diversify. You have to. If you don't diversify the economy here, you will have high unemployment. You have to, unfortunately, because it'll be simply an agriculturally based economy, and you can't have that.
Do you have any concerns about renewable energy coming into a place that is not necessarily used to renewable energy?
Sure. Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, there are some real concerns, I think, that have to be taken care of. I mean, some sites that are inappropriate for renewable energy. Creating the right type of renewable energies that create jobs, and that's, I think, very, very important. You can't replace one type of economy with another type of economy that doesn't produce jobs. I mean, when you're doing that, you have to figure out, okay, we're going to not completely replace agriculture, because that's never going to happen, obviously, and we don't want that to happen. But we do want to see a diversification. But we don't want to see a diversification where it's a jobless diversification. I mean, that's what we're seeing right now in the United States. One of the things we are seeing that's sad is that we have a jobless recovery. I've been reading quite a bit about this, and one of the things that's interesting is this, that our economy is recovering. It's recovering slowly, but without creation of the jobs. And it seems that one of the reasons for that is because so much of the recovery is high tech and biotech and these economies where a lot of people get paid a lot of money at the top, but very few people work at it. Very few people get paid money at the bottom. So yes, the economy is recovering in the sense of numbers in the sense of the economy itself, and you're having some people that are doing quite well economically. But it's not like a manufacturing recovery where you have more people manufacturing goods. So you have a strong middle class, and then you have more and more people working. It's not like that this time. And so we want to make sure that doesn't happen here, where you diversify, but you diversify into something that creates very few jobs. So we want to have, that's why I mentioned geothermal. I mean, geothermal creates a lot of jobs, high-paying jobs. It's the great type of alternative energy, that's renewable, that's fantastic. So that's what we have to look at.
Are you more optimistic about geothermal?
I'm very optimistic. Very optimistic.
Compared to other industries?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very unique resource that you have here in the Valley. It's a very rich resource. It's one that I think, it takes a lot of money up front, and there are a lot of challenges with that. There's no doubt about that. I've been involved in, a couple of these plants out there trying to get everybody to work together. And it is hard. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's hard because the upfront money is huge. But at the same time, you have to remember that this is the best type of alternative energy. This renewable resource is one where you can put it into the system 24 hours a day. You can always put it into what they call the base load. So it's always there. It's not like wind. Wind you can't put into the base load because you don't know when it's going to be, when it's going to be blown.
I see. Moving into our north end, Salton Sea is the Alien Sea has been gaining momentum, and journalists from all over the world are coming in and looking at the Salton Sea, and the next few years are critical for this. Reports say. And what do you think could and should be done about the Salton Sea, and or local agencies, public agencies, should do to address that problem in the few years that we have left for something to be done?
Yeah, as you know, Ken Salazar was here recently and took a look at the issue from the perspective of the federal government. And I mean, I think one of the things that he wants to do is to get moving on something fairly quickly. But I'm hoping that the solution really comes locally, in the sense that so much of this has been pushed top down from Sacramento. A lot of the people now in the community are saying, well, wait a minute, we haven't had much of a say in what should be done with the Salton Sea. It's all kind of come from Sacramento, from above. And so we'd like some of the solutions to come up from us, not from on high. And I think that that's right. However, I also think we got to get moving, because if we don't get moving, we are going to be behind the eight ball, in the sense that there could be a real environmental catastrophes out there. I mean, if you have a large portion of the sea that dries up, the dust that could potentially be kicked up from that could be very, very dangerous to human beings, especially with the high incidence of asthma that you have out here, with the type of plants, the electrical plants that were put in Mexicali without meeting American standards, and throwing more pollution into the air. I mean, you're at that critical point where if you do have a catastrophe out there in the Salton Sea, it could be very dastardly. So we do have to get moving. The solutions should come from the community here, and I'm excited about it, but at the same time I'm very weary. I mean, we're heading into a time where the federal government says it has no money, and you find tell it like it is, the Republicans saying, we're not going to spend any money, and it becomes a real difficult situation. I mean, what do you do when you have these real needs, and you have others saying, well, we're going to go through these sequestration, we're going to make across-the-board cuts. When you're making cuts like that, it creates no opportunity then to fund these other projects, border infrastructure, Salton Sea, environmental mitigation, all these other things, get wiped out when you have a recalcitrant party saying, no more, we're not going to do anything, we're going to shut the government down, we're going to, take the money away. Well, gosh, guys, real lives are at stake here. You can't do that. So anyway, I mean, we're heading into a difficult situation. I find it ironic. I was telling some of the Board of Supervisors members, the last number of years I've been in Sacramento, we've been working on very difficult decisions. We've made a bunch of difficult cuts. We've raised taxes, but we've righted the ship. Now the state's going to do pretty well because we made these very difficult decisions. But now we're going forward, and the reality is the state probably will have $1 billion surplus this year. They'll be able to pay all its bills and have $1 billion surplus because we made all this difficult decision. But we were able to work together. Even the Republicans, they kind of would say, well, we don't really like what you're doing, but we think it's going to work. But we're going to have to oppose you, but we're not going to oppose you real loud. We're just going to say it's against it, but we're not going to try to throw a monkey wrench in the system, because we think at the end of the day you guys are probably right, but we can't say that because we might lose our jobs, because we're really way out there on the right. I said, well, we get it, but just allow us to do it. They did, and here we are. I think the best days of California are still ahead. Now I'm going back to Washington, beginning my career there, and you hear these guys, and there's no moderates. In Sacramento, you have still a number of moderate Republicans that want to work with the. Now I'm watching the Republicans fight among themselves. I mean, one of the most amazing things for me was this fight for Speaker. The Republicans won the election for the House. It should have been 2 seconds, and people said, okay, those from Nancy Pelosi, raise your hand. The Democrats would have raised their hand. Those for, the other guy, Boehner, raise your hand. But instead, there was a big fight. The Republicans fought among themselves. They were voting for Colin Powell, Alan West. They're making up names. The bunny rabbit. I don't know. And ultimately, the speaker won by, I guess, one vote. So they're not calling him the speaker anymore. They're calling him the squeaker. This is the squeaker because he squeaked on by. And we as Democrats are looking and say, my God, how can you run a business like this? How can you run a nation like this? I mean, you can't have that kind of division within their own party. They can't even agree. And that makes it very difficult. I mean, I feel badly for Boehner because I do think he wants to do the right thing, but he seems to have so many wackos out there that don't let him do it. I feel badly for him. And again, I have a lot of friends on the Republican side, and I had him up in Sacramento. I had him on the city council. I developing them there in Washington, and they say, God, our party is gone so far to the right that Ronald Reagan, would have been condemned because Ronald Reagan was in favor of outlawing assault weapons.
Right.
He was in favor of that. He signed amnesty. He thought it was a good thing. He was in favor of affirmative action. He raised taxes in California when he needed to. I mean, they would throw him out of the party. I mean, it's sad. Someone as conservative as we thought as Ronald Reagan, would get thrown out of the party as a communist today.
So with that in mind, then, that there's an ability to move forward. Do you think it's transcending to the Salton Sea? And if so, how do we move away from it? I mean, you named Mr. Salazar, and he resigned after making a very strong promise. He came here a couple weeks ago,
right,
and make a very strong. How do we keep that? How do we follow up?
Well, we're going to try to see if we can, talk to those people right below him and say, we heard exactly what was said, and we'd like to see some of those commitments kept. And we think that they're pretty hard commitments, some of them, and so we're going back and meeting with them and trying to insist that, these monies that seem to be promised, if not promised, certainly alluded to, they be made available to get on with the work. But that being said, I mean, we do need a much larger infusion of money and capital and that's not within the near horizon. I mean, it's just not. I don't believe that the Republicans will allow much money to be spent on. I just don't. I mean, I'm hoping to be mistaken, but I suspect that they won't.
So legislatively, at least for the Salton Sea, you're a little bit not so positive on it then?
Short term, I'm not so positive on it. I'll be frank. I don't like to lie. Short term, no. Long term, we have to do something. And that's going to be our argument, Okay, in the short term, if we can't get any money or very little money for the final solution, we've got to figure out how to do it long term, because if we don't, we're going to have an environmental catastrophe. But in the short term, I don't see the Republicans wanting to help. I don't want them seeing spending. I don't see them wanting to spend any money on this issue. Yeah.
Moving these issues and going to more funding issues.
Yeah.
The Calexico Port of Entry, the famous or infamous. Assemblyman Hueso just introduced a joint resolution a couple of days ago calling for the federal government, Homeland Security, GSA, to get funding for San Isidro and POE here in Calexico. Do you think the Valley needs something beyond a joint resolution to get that funding? What do you see in that area now?
Well, first of all, I thank Assemblymember Hueso. I think it's helpful to get the state to say that this is a priority for the state. So first of all, I want to thank him for that resolution. I think it's a very positive step forward. And then we need to do obviously more. The money hasn't been funded yet, and we don't have the money. At one point it was pulled back, and we all know why. Again, it was the issue of the federal government having no money, and then going on top of that having this whole issue of potential sequestration. So it is. I mean, there's no doubt it's going to be difficult. I mean, let's not pretend that it's not. However, all that being said, I'm going to make this argument, and I think you're going to see that it's going to come to fruition. There's this point where they call the point of indifference in business, and that is where if you produce something in one place or another place, it costs the same. I always give the example of the iPhone. You know, the most expensive thing on the iPhone, most people don't know what it is. What do you think the most expensive thing of the iPhone is?
Oh, the mineral battery?
It's actually the lens.
Right.
The lens is the most expensive one. Labor to develop the iPhone is 8%. 8% of the actual product is labor. So it's not actually that high. But it is still cheaper to be made, to make in China, no doubt about it. So it's cheaper to produce this phone in China. However, in about 2 years, it's going to be the same to produce in China or in Mexico. And the reason for that is the cost in China is accelerating at a much higher pace than the cost in Mexico. So although both of them are seeing their costs increase, as you always do because of inflation or just, you know, money, you see that the increase is at a lower rate in areas like Mexico and the United States compared to China. China's had a very low rate of construction, but now their facilities are going up. It's becoming more and more expensive to build the facilities to do these things. Labor rates are going up. So their rates, their expense rates are actually creeping up at a higher rate than ours. So those are going to intersect with Mexico pretty soon, and it'll cost the same to produce something in Mexico as it does in China. I think once you hit that cost, that line of indifference, that indifference cost, I think you're going to see a lot of things coming back from China to Mexico along the border. And once that happens, I think you're going to see even larger lines of trucks trying to cross. And that's what I'm trying to make the argument. I'm saying, look, we're already seeing it. I'm already seeing it. I'm already seeing that some of these companies are coming back. Some of these maquiladoras that had left are coming back. It's going to make more and more sense for them to come back for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which transportation. It's far away to go to China. A lot of things can happen out there in the ocean. And instead of you're just crossing things across the border here, you got much better control. You know, you think something's going wrong on the planet, you just go over the border and check it out. So I believe, and I think we're starting to see this, and economists are writing about this, that more and more of these products are going to come back and they're going to be manufactured here along the border. Ultimately, they'll be manufactured in the United States, but that'll take some time. But right now, they're going to be manufactured in Mexico. So we need to do something with the infrastructure along the border, all the way through, not only obviously in California, in Arizona and Texas also, but California, I think, is the one that needs the most help, and certainly the one I represent, so I'm going to be the one pushing for that.
So what challenges do you see in this bringing funding for that?
The budget issue. I mean, I think it's going to continue to be one. I think we're going to be able to make a very strong argument for the need. I think the need is going to be clear. I think the worthiness of these projects are clear. I don't think there's going to be any doubt about that. It's going to be simply the funding, the recalcitrance of some to spend any money on infrastructure. And I think we have to overcome that and make our case and say, you know, it's like any other business. If you don't invest, you know, you won't have the outcomes. I mean, you won't have the positive outcomes. So we have to invest. And I'm hoping that at the end of the day we can convince enough people to make that happen.
And well, I have to ask, how long do you think it would take? I mean, the problem of me as journalists, I've been writing about local leaders and residents complaining over and over, and they don't seem to find an answer. How long do you think it could take to get the ball rolling, so to speak?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to make it up because the reality is I just got there, one, and secondly, I am surprised at the level of dysfunction that I found in Washington. It's not the same in Sacramento. Interestingly, I know that a lot of people speak ill of Sacramento, but in Sacramento, at least things were getting done. I mean, and I think at the end of the day, we proved it by writing our budget. Now, the budget now is in good shape. The truth of the matter is we made very difficult decisions, but we did fund those things that we needed to fund. And, you know, I look at D.C. and the dysfunction is just so much deeper than it is in Sacramento. I'm hoping, I mean, I believe in God and I believe in prayer, and I believe that, you know, you work hard and things will change, and so I'm the eternal optimist. So I do think that things will change and turn around. One of the things I think in California that was very positive in the sense of politics is that we took some of the politics out by creating open voting open primaries and open general, so anybody can run, and you can have two people of the same party running against each other, which you have had in California now. And I think that creates more moderation. And right now, I mean, I talked to a couple of people that I've met and have become friendly with through some of the prayer groups that I go to, and they tell me, well, I got to be way out there on the right, because if not, I'll be challenged by the right in the primary. I said, well, but in the general, goes, no, but the problem is I'll get taken out in the primary. If we had open primaries, I could be more myself. But since we don't, I've got to be kind of artificially way out there on the right. I said, well, that's crazy. I mean, that to me sounds crazy. But, their friends there will be honest with you, and they say, they have to act much more conservative than they really are. Otherwise they feel they're going to lose their jobs by someone in their own party. And now after watching them, I believe them. Like, wow, you guys are crazy.
The public-private partnership.
Yeah.
Your thoughts and expectations about that and the meeting that you're going to have then?
Sure. Well, I think it can be very positive. I mean, we're looking for solutions, obviously, and this could be one. So we're looking for something that works for the people, something that works for this community. And I'm very hopeful. Again, it has to make sense, and so we will work together with everybody to see if this makes sense. But what we want to do is we want to deliver a product here in this community sooner rather than later. And again, because I do think that you're going to see much more of the growth that you experienced, we experienced earlier in last decade. In this decade, you're going to see a lot of these manufacturing jobs coming back. You're going to see a lot more opportunities coming here. And if we get stagnated at the border, if we get trapped at the border, it's going to be very problematic. I think we'll miss out. And so we've got to figure out some way to develop this infrastructure, and this might be the right way to do it. But, I mean, obviously the numbers are going to be important, and it's something that we have to all work together for, but it could be a potential solution.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time.
Alejandro, anytime.